Senator Tim Keller is here, New Mexico State Senator Tim Keller, and we're going to talk to him about a variety of issues regarding the state, national, anything we can talk about. All right?
So, sounds good.
And I'm sure you're pretty well versed in everything. Tell us what your feel is. We'll talk a little bit about the national, and then we'll come back to the state, and then we'll go into what you're running for a state auditor. We'll get into that in the end there. Nationally, we're coming out of there's a little green shoots there. We're talking about the unemployment dropped a little bit, still pretty high, 7.5%. The president proposed the budget, and there's some stuff going on with besides like scandal stuff going on. I never talk about that stuff on this show, but overall, what is your feel as far as the economy, national economy? What would you like to see?
Well, I think the good news is we are really seeing across the United States, things improving. And I know it's slower than, most people would want or than I think a lot of us are comfortable with. But hopefully that slowness means that it's legitimate. We're not just sort of building up to another bubble, be it an IT bubble or a housing crisis, sort of thing that's going to happen down the road. Hopefully this is legitimate economic growth based on solid base manufacturing job creation. And I think, the challenge really we have here in New Mexico is that we see everyone around us rising up. And in New Mexico, we're really not, unfortunately. And so we're seeing our neighbors, whether it's, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Texas, Oklahoma, they're riding sort of the crest of the national economy going up, while New Mexico, I think, is at best flat. We've lost, I think 46,000 jobs. We're forecasted to lose another 20,000. And, for our state, we're also suffering from a brain drain to these areas around us. And so I think what it does is it really highlights, what we've got to do in New Mexico. And it basically, hopefully, will be an impetus for us to sort of maybe take some bigger steps than we have in the past.
Do you feel that the current governor, I know she came in at a time it was pretty rough, okay? We're trying to be fair to her. What do you think, what do you feel personally, because you're in the legislature for the last few years, what do you feel where do you feel she went wrong as far as not being able to create, because there wasn't not many jobs created. Yeah. And when they came in, they made a lot of promises, of course, and they had their own ideologies about how to create them. Where do you feel that she was short as far as?
I think there's probably two key areas. The first one is more of a political science point, and that's just that any governor who comes in has got to understand that, there's three branches of government, and you need all three to work together. And I think when she came in, she lost 5 successive Supreme Court cases, and then also wasn't very receptive to a lot of legislative ideas that bipartisanly had been cooked up for a long time. And, it was kind of like, well, I'm new here and we're going to do things my way. And, American democracy just isn't set up that way at the federal or state level. And so I think that really caused a sort of a misfire that we're still really seeing. And the second reason, I think, is that a lot of the ideas that were pitched, I think, are basically, they're small ideas in that they're important in their own right, but they're not going to move the needle when we talk about where our state is in terms of being 49th in per capita income or, job growth and all these areas. Small tax changes here and there, picking an industry here or there, we need a lot more than that.
The tax cuts they talked about, they felt that would lure some business here. Do you think that's the case? Or that's not working so far?
I think
I haven't seen anybody come in as far as businesses or corporations or anything.
I think we would all certainly be better off if, some businesses did come because of that. But I think those of us who worked on that bill, whether you were for it or against it, will agree that with the exception of the film piece, I think that's really going to help. Fixing the damage, actually, frankly, that was done when the governor first took office in the film industry, we at least went back and fixed that. So we are seeing job growth in the film sector again, and that's great for all New Mexicans. But the challenge is, there was a tax reform bill. That's not going to move the needle with respect to widespread growth or job creation across the state. It was really tweaking some taxes that a lot of folks thought we needed to fix. But it's no proxy for economic development.
Yeah, so we're losing the revenue there, but then their ideology was, well, a lot of outside corporations are looking at us and probably going to start coming in. But so far, you haven't seen anybody come in. So, and then even locally too, when you look at the city itself, New Mexico Partnership, probably heard John Garcia and Steve Irek, I think, talked about diversifying from the state, the federal jobs at like the Sandia and Los Alamos, places like that, and coming into the private sector. It's great if it works, but then I'm not really sure how that works because you have $70,000, $80,000 jobs there, and then they're talking about call centers and stuff, which is $10 an hour job.
Right.
It doesn't really help us. Am I right? Is that?
We're sort of trading down.
Yeah, so they were talking about that diversity. They used the word diversification from away from federal jobs, and we've been relying on it for like 60 years, you know, on that. And
I think there's really, there's a couple areas to that that are unfortunate. One is, whenever I talk to companies that are here, and whenever I hear about companies that want to come to New Mexico, when you meet with them one-on-one, they rarely pick a tax policy. They always go after education and workforce training. That's their issue. And so they will say, you know, there's not enough engineers available coming out of our universities, or not enough computer programmers. That's the number one complaint they have. And then quickly followed by, well, they're worried about the school system and their families and that kind of thing, and sort of more of a K through 12 issue. So I actually think if we could do anything to actually structurally change the jobs environment in New Mexico, it would be with respect to K through 12 education and then higher education. You know, we have to become a leader in some areas of the modern economy, or we're going to be a low-cost labor provider for the rest of the country. And that, I think, that's where everyone in New Mexico loses, basically. And that's a little bit what you were alluding to.
I think, no, exactly. And we're competing internationally now.
Yeah.
We're no longer competing with other states. I mean, we are, but when you really look at it, it's an international market now. Everybody's competing for jobs. So there is that issue with the skilled labor. So a lot of the corporations look at it, and there's a deficit there as far as this state. We're losing a lot of brain drain, like you mentioned. We have a population moving out of here now because last few years, since 08, I think the economy, housing collapsed. And then Texas is getting a lot of that business. Arizona is getting some of that. I mentioned that on my show before. We're the top 5 states where people are leaving. And they're all heading towards south. They're going into Texas and all that. We'll take a short break in a few seconds here. We'll come back. Let's get into some of the other areas. I know education, you brought up education. I think that's kind of important. They want to hear about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about the economy and stuff. And your district, we'll get into that.
Great.
And your run for state auditors. Okay, so we'll take a short break and we'll come back. Okay?
Thank you.
We'll be taking a short break. We'll be back with Senator Tim Keller, and we'll be back.